Borderlands introduced their take on raid bosses way back on Borderlands 1. Since then, we've had a wide variety of them across multiple games in the franchise. They exist to give players a good, challenging fight and be a source for endgame loot, and these are my top 10 best raid bosses in Borderlands history.
And number 10 is...
Starting us off with one of the many Borderlands 2 raid bosses that I love to fight, whether it was solo or with friends, Pyro Pete. Pete served as sort of an introductory raid boss for many players in Borderlands 2. It was challenging to solo, but with good enough build and gear, it was doable for most players. Pete also had a couple of spots in his arena where you could cheese the fight a little bit. This ledge back here could be jumped up to via grenade or rocket jumps, or via this strange glitch that allow you to repeatedly spam your jump button to get up here. From there, you could hide behind these beams to avoid his elemental rage attacks. Conversely, there's also this spot behind these rafters that also serves as another spot to hide safely from his attacks. Once you beat Pete, he had 3 Seraph items that he could potentially drop: the hoplite, the typo negative grenade, or the big boom blaster shield. There's also the added bonus of riding his elevator up to the top, where there were also 2 more red chests for you to loot.
Number 9!
At number 9, the Ancient Dragons. This was one of those raid bosses that sure, you could solo it if you were a high-end player with nearly perfect gear, but doing this fight in a party of 4 was amazing. It took coordination, communication, and knowledge of the mechanics of the fight. Slagging any of the dragons while they are airborne would cause them to resist slag when they land, and that was always a bit of a nightmare. But ultimately, this raid was challenging, but often fun with friends. The dragons also dropped some really decent loot in the Stinger, the Omen shotgun, and the Blockade shield. Furthermore, they probably had the best treasure room of any raid boss in any Borderlands game ever, and a cool hidden Easter egg inside of that treasure room.
Number 8!
Now let's take a trip back to the OG raid boss from Borderlands 1, the granddaddy who started Borderlands down this path of raid bosses, Crawmerax. Crawmerax was a lot of Borderlands players' first experience with a giant raid boss in an arena that appeared to have nowhere to hide. You needed to be fast and accurate to hit its crit spots, and if it put you into fight for your life, there were usually little enemies around to help you get a second win off of. This made the fight tough, but fair. Crawl also had a huge loot explosion after the fight, often dropping multiple legendary items and occasionally a pearlescent, which was also our introduction to that rarity. Borderlands 2 attempted to do something similar to Crawmerax with Dexidius, but that concept fell really flat.
Number 7!
At number 7, Hemaphorus and Vermirus from Borderlands 3. Now, Borderlands 3 made a critical mistake in not releasing a standalone raid boss until Season Pass 2, but Hemaphorus and Vermirus are a pretty substantial challenge for in-game content. Now, if you go into their lair on Mayhem 5 or below, Vermirus will not be in there. They put him in there to make the fight that much more brutal on the higher Mayhem levels, and let me tell you, without a min-max build and gear, this fight can be chaos. The visual pollution alone serves as a 3rd raid boss in the arena. The mechanics of this fight aren't anything too special or crazy, and the loot is sadly obtainable elsewhere, meaning you never even have to fight Hemaphorus to get any of their drops. This is a huge design mistake in my opinion. If you're going to present a tough raid boss, then give them loot that can only be obtained there. Likewise, Vermirus in this fight doesn't even have a dedicated drop. There's so much potential here, but the loot is lacking.
And now for number 6!
Speaking of Vermirus, they made their original appearance in Borderlands 2 as a hidden raid boss that could only be spawned by evolving Varkids multiple times. At launch, this was completely impossible to do solo and extremely rare even in a party of 4. Eventually, Gearbox patched it and made it possible but rare to spawn even when playing solo. What made Vermi so formidable and fun is the randomness of where you can encounter them: Caustic Caverns, Tundra Express, or even while fighting another Borderlands 2 raid boss, the son of Crawmerax. Vermi was extremely beefy and could down you lightning fast, but when you finally killed it, you had a 20% chance to get one of the most OP weapons in Borderlands history, the Norfleet. And let me tell you, there's nothing like killing Vermirus 10 times in a row and only getting the rare head drop or the nasty surprise grenade. That 20% drop chance was mean.
And here we are at number 5!
At number 5, Scourge and Anathema, the Guardian Takedown. Now, the Guardian Takedown has this bad reputation, and honestly, it's well deserved. However, the boss fights in this takedown are some of my favorites in franchise history. Anathema, while not labeled an Invincible, is part of this takedown, so I'm including them here. A lot of people complain about immune phases, myself included. I'm looking at you, evil Lilith. But Anathema is immune phases done in a fun way, at least in my opinion. You have to dodge and jump to safety, then back, and that reminds me of like the old NES days and fighting bosses on Mario Brothers, Castlevania, or Mega Man. Then you get to the end of the takedown, and Scourge is also an extremely fun fight. Once you learn the mechanics of both these fights, they're relatively easy, all things considered, especially if you've got min-max builds, but still, there is a challenge in the risk of dying and failing that give you a sense of accomplishment when you defeat it. Now, if only the loot after either boss was actually worth chasing.
Moving on to number 4!
At number 4, the Invincible Sentinel from the pre-sequel. An entry on this list that many players might have forgotten, much like the game that it's from, the Invincible Sentinel in Borderlands the pre-sequel remains one of my favorite raid bosses to this day. This boss has several phases, with each being a little bit tougher than the last. There's also some great mechanics to learn to simplify the fight, and you have to properly match your elements to do proper damage. This boss also had some really solid drops in the long nail sniper rifle and the bulwark shield, although the drop rate for both was only 2.5%, and that was made worse by the fact that you could also get the stupid ass black hole shield in this boss fight too. Ultimately, if you've never played the pre-sequel, this boss is absolutely worth doing one playthrough so you can take it on and see what it's like.
And now we're down to number 3.
At number 3, Hyperius. As a zero main on Borderlands 2, Hyperius was one of my favorite raids to fight. But even on other Vault Hunters, I was really fond of the mechanics of this one. Hyperius would surround himself in his nearly impenetrable shield, and then when you damage his bots, he'd move that shield over to them, leaving himself exposed. This meant you had to work to get him open while dodging attacks and playing cautiously. In a team setting, most groups would hide a siren near the door behind this beam to avoid Hyperius's huge Nova attack. That siren would be the team reviver, using res from long range to get people back into the fight. And once defeated, Hyperius has a ridiculously low 1.7% chance to drop the Norfleet. His loot pool consisted of 6 legendary drops, all with ridiculously low drop chances. I have so many fond memories running this boss with viewers and friends that the drop rates didn't even matter that much to me.
And here we are at number 2.
Coming in at number 2, Terramorphous. Now, Terramorphous was my very first raid boss ever, and she absolutely smashed me and my buddy Alan the first time we dropped in there. Eventually, we discovered the B and the conference call combo back before it was nerfed, and we absolutely destroyed Terra. But even without broken gear combos, there was many ways to take on this raid boss, and taking this one on with a group was always a good time as well. Pride Rock near the exit of the arena was a popular hangout spot for many players. This was a great way to keep your B shield intact so you could do damage from a distance. Terra also had the distinction of dropping what is likely the truest rare item in Borderlands 2, a grounded hide of Terramorphous shield. Getting a perfect one is 1 in 97 million drop chance, so if you want a challenge, I'll see you in 100+ years.
Honorable mention.
Honorable mentions go to the Son of Crawmerax, Hatarax, and Veracitus from Borderlands 2, EOS and Iragira from Borderlands the pre-sequel. Even though those two weren't considered raid bosses, they definitely felt like it. And in Borderlands 3, the true Proving Grounds bosses, Psycho Reaver, Seer, Captain Haunt, and Joey Ultraviolet. And likewise, even though none of those are labeled as an invincible, they all have health values comparable to a raid boss. They have some great loot, and all 6 true Proving Grounds, Captain Haunt, Joey Ultraviolet, all of those feel like miniature takedowns in my opinion, and they all have great loot.
And finally, here we are at number 1.
Finally, coming in at number 1, Wotan and the Valkyries from Maliwan Takedown Borderlands 3. Anybody who's actually defeated this takedown knows what a work of art it is. The flow of the maps, the increasing challenges you work toward the boss, the crack and the Valkyries, and Wotan themselves. Every aspect of this takedown is a solid 10 out of 10 for me, right down to the loot at the end, which you might have noticed was a theme from other raid bosses to this point. A lot of them have disappointing loot, but Wotan can drop the Kibsworth, the Redistributor, the Moonfire, and the Tig's Boom, all with solid 18% drop chances, and can actually drop multiple of each of these things per run. Can also drop all of the Mayhem 4 exclusives in this fight as well. The multiple phases of Wotan are fun and exciting, requiring movement and strategy, or if you have a strong enough build, shot placement, and gear combinations. Either way, this takedown should be the standard for raids going forward in Borderlands games, but I still want standalone arena-like raids like Terramorphous and Hyperius as well. So hopefully Gearbox is listening. There you have it. That's my top 10 raid bosses in Borderlands history. Let me know in the comment section below what's your favorite raid boss in Borderlands franchise history. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing for more Borderlands content. Thank you guys for watching. Take care.